he was a person with a vision, and he was a person who really knew what his vision included. There were, we had just finished up with Vatican II, and long before Vatican II, he was out with his 4 or 5 buddies that he always hung around with, one of whom I know you're going to be talking to, Jim O'Donnell, and how he was pushing the liturgy. He became a very positive liturgist, and how he was promoting the vernacular language back in those days when we still had it in Latin, or almost all of it in Latin.
And his whole thrust was, I want the people to really be nourished in the Word of God and nourished in the Eucharist. And then even there as Eucharist, as priests, we preside, but we don't, the people consecrate the host and everything. We all do this together. It's not just the ordained priest that lifts up the chalice and lifts up the host. Yes, we do that. But in doing that, it's not just you, it's everybody. And
I always remember he would say to us, as a young priest, they would tell him, well, the Mass will always be in Latin. It will never change. It will always be this way. It always has been and always will be. And he said, and then lo and behold, the Vatican Council happened, and suddenly the Mass is in the vernacular. And he said, so there's always the power of the Spirit working in the church. And so it may not work as quickly as we'd like it to, the hierarchy, but we have to trust in that Spirit.
We did not have a church. First Mass was in the gymnasium at Dorothy Lewis Parish. And in the course of his homily, I'm just going to read a couple sentences here that I thought really captured what Louis thought when it came to pastoral leadership. He said, there is no need to ask us, where is our church going to be? Or when are we going to get a church? The fact is, we have a church. You are the church. We have a church because the church is where God dwells. A church is called the house of God, not because it's a beautiful building, but because God's people are here and God dwells with his people.
He recognized everyone's giftedness. He wasn't caught up with his own power. He saw us together, that the church is together. The church is not just the hierarchy. The church is all of us working together with our varied gifts. And in humility, he would always really ask others to be part of things and to take leadership roles.
It's everybody. And that's what he was making people aware of. That's why he wanted Future Church, was that it was just future being that nobody was thinking on the bigger picture and the bigger area and the risks that would demand, like being the first one to form a pastoral team of men and women together. That this is not just for the priest, this is for the whole Church of God coming together. So he was one of the first to have a pastoral team. And then I think Jack McDonough, St. Mary Magdalene's, but those two in particular broke the grounds on that one.
Louis was sensing the growing lack of priests for the various parishes, for religious women, things of that nature. And I think at discussions at the parish council led to, we have something about this, and we cannot let the Eucharist depart from us. We need the Eucharist as our source of nourishment. And I think it was at that time that Future Church became an entity. And it also became an entity filled with the participation of a lot of the parishioners of Church of the Resurrection.
Well, I was a member of the community of St. Malachi, where gave me the opportunity, and I was on the steering committee for the community, and gave me an opportunity to hear what was going on. And we supported the resolution from Resurrection.
Mhm.
And the resolution, the position was that the centrality of the Eucharist outweighs the life and gender of a priest. And so that told us that, okay, something else is going on there that we want to have happen. So the two committees got together and started working together. And I said yes to that because first I believed in what was to happen, but I also saw who was involved with this. The people around the table, Louis Trivison was well respected throughout the diocese. And so you can't go wrong with something like that. And then Paul Ritz, who was our pastor, was there. And so they were like-minded people. And that gave me the energy to continue to stay with the group.
When I first came to the meetings at Future Church, again, not knowing exactly what it was going to be like, I was so moved and touched by the deep spirituality, faith, and love of the church, of all the people that were gathered there. And that's what kept me going. And that's what really touched my heart to say, I want to be part of this, because these are good people. These are not rebels who are looking to overthrow the church or change our traditions as to what is really important, but people who deeply love the Eucharist and want to see it preserved. They love the church. There was vitality and energy and enthusiasm, and that's what kept me there. And yes, there were people that didn't understand why we were gathering, but I think we were always respectful. We tried to interact with the hierarchy at the time, and I really believe that the real soul and spirit of not just Vatican II, but the person of Jesus Christ himself was alive with all those that gathered.
And on our second year, we had a fundraiser.
Mhm.
And Reverend Richard McBrien was to be the speaker.
Mhm.
And we had 700 people, reps, clerics and lay people, attend that dinner. Now that did it. That said, okay, now we've got to do something more than just have presentations. So we came together and had a process. And at the end of that, we had the beginnings of an office with Sister Christine Schenk as the first executive director.
Mhm.
And then we formed a leadership council to work along with the director.
Mhm.
And Lou Trivison and myself were the first co-coordinators of that. And that's how it started. And we just kept growing with other parishes hanging on to us. I mean, just knowing that we were really going and taking the right steps to bring reform, if we could, in the Catholic Church.
Well, Louis had a vision and of what the future could be. And that, needless to say, got a lot of support, but a lot of flack as well. Because it was, even to this day, some people don't understand, why do you call it Future Church? Well, it was a vision that needed to be brought forth.
And at that time, it was focused on the importance of the Eucharist. How do we diversify the leadership?
Mhm.
How do we start to think about married priests, women priests, all of those things that at that time were kind of new. And when people would hear that, it wouldn't necessarily register with them.
You know, one of the big things with Louis was that if the priests have to be away from the parish for the week, whatever it is, don't have a communion service, because people will think they went to Mass.
Mhm.
And that's what we don't want them to think, because they didn't go to Mass. So that met with a lot of flack, but it was right that this way that people will understand what it means to be without a priest.
He understood the Eucharist and what that meant. And he also knew that there were so many ways we could deal with the shortage of priests that was starting to happen. Because of his intelligence, it's hard for me to describe exactly what it was, but he just knew who to tap and who to connect with and how to go about it.
He loved the Eucharist deeply, and anybody who knew Louis knew that that was the center of his life, and that's what he always engendered in his parishioners, in people that came to him for spiritual direction, is that it's the Eucharist that empowers us to go forward. And so because he was so well respected, I think it continued to give Future Church credibility.
He had a brief statement at the end of his homily about the Eucharist. I thought it was very apropos. I'll read it to you. In the Eucharist, we come to Christ with all our brokenness, our flawed personalities, our human weaknesses, regardless of our state in life. We ask for the grace to be faithful to our baptism commitment to Christ, and we must do this for better or for worse, not until death separates us, but until death unites us to Christ forever.
With his insight and his wanting to continue and his ability to know how to proceed was the thing that kept us going. I mean, he brought it to life, and we followed him.
Mm-hmm.
He taught us so much about it was to live a spiritual life, to be a contemplative person, to have a great love for the Eucharist, but not just in an isolated thing, but he gave us a richness of what it really means to be a follower of Jesus and to live his word.
When I think back to the gift really that Future Church was for me, and that Louis was, and that I believe still is. I still pray to him. I know he's in heaven. I know he's praying for our church and doing wonderful things with and through us.
I think if he was here today, he would probably be sitting here and he'd be saying, well, this too shall pass. I think that's a little statement he would like to say occasionally. And he would be saying, out of this, ultimately, some good things are going to come, even if it was in the midst of this coronavirus that we're experiencing.
He might look down and say, keep on keeping on. That's what he would say. Now, he said, I'm working for you up here, but you've got to keep on doing it down there. And it takes patience. You can't get through this without patience. And so he might say also, is that all the farther you are?
He always had to be the one that drove, no matter where we went, on vacations or whatever. He had to be the one that was behind that wheel. And sometimes it would be difficult to get him to different places. And when we would finally arrive, he says, I got you here, didn't I? Yeah, you did. And I guess that would be a thing that could carry through in many ways. I got you here, didn't I? No.